Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Social Club at the End of the World. Happy to be joined by my queen, Melissa.
Good morning, Ma.
My brother, Dan, in Chicago.
Good morning, Dan.
And Dan, just jump in anytime. Let's just kind of start with, let's just jump right in. Dan's a bit under the weather. I appreciate your being here today, Dan. And a couple other folks are out sick or have other commitments, so it'll be kind of a skeleton crew here at the Social Club. Dan, you were saying some really amazing stuff. I'm going to go on mute, and but just we don't have to queue up or anything with such a yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, sweetie. Yeah.
I want to start this Social Club with the Haida thanking Mother Earth for all that she provides us with song, just to remember the First Nations people whose land we are on this continent in North America. And then I just wanted to read two quotes because, Dan, I'm right there with you. I tried to get into Seattle, but the snow was so bad on the roads that I actually had to turn around and come back. And on the way to drive back, a friend of mine called me and said, "Hey, Mel, have you seen the article about the insects and about the polar bears?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And she told me that basically the insects are gone. I mean, they're extincting so fast now. And she also mentioned the polar bears have been breaking into apartments up north to try and find food. And I've just been sobbing all morning. So I'm going to start with a Haida blessing song to thank Mother Earth, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah.
Yaha hey, ya hey, yaha hey, ya hey, ah ha ha, yaha hey, ya hey, yaha hey, ya hey, yaha hey, ya hey, ah ha ha, yaha hey, ya hey. Woo! That is thanking Mother Earth for all that she provides for life. The other thing I wanted to read, I believe this is a quote from Chief Seattle, although it could be another tribe. Only when the last tree has died and the last river has been poisoned and the last fish has been caught will you realize that you cannot eat your money. And the other quote I wanted to read from Chief Seattle, when the earth is sick, the animals will begin to disappear. When that happens, the warriors of the rainbow will come to save them. And I wanted to read that because, Dan, I just wanted, following what you're saying, there is this feeling of total and utter despair and grieving. I am just grieving every day for not so much a human race, but more for all of life that's affected by our actions. But I've made this commitment to defend Mother Earth and to do whatever I can until my last breath on this earth to help protect her and restore healing if it's at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you, love. I want to welcome Dr. Salish Rao, who is introduced to us by Jeff Kuntz. Dr. Rao,
hi, how are you?
Great to see you. Great to see you.
You too.
We're just kind of, we usually start the session with, people providing updates. I also want to welcome Adam, who just joined. And maybe I'll introduce Dr. Rao just briefly. Actually, love to let you say a few words, and then we'll, take your time, introduce yourself, Dr. Rao. You come very recommended from our friend Jeff Kuntz. So welcome, and please take your time. No pressure. By the way, no one is ever required to speak on the Social Club at the End of the World. It's a very compassionate community that we have here, very open. So with that said, Dr. Rao, please feel free to jump in.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you to Jeff for introducing me to you and the Social Club. I have a suggestion about the name of the Social Club. It's called the Social Club at the End of the World. I would suggest changing that to the Social Club at the End of This World. because it is
beautiful.
because there is another world that's possible, and that's we have to birth it, you know.
Absolutely.
And that's what I've been working on. I've been working on a project called Vegan World 2026. So I started Climate Healers back in 2007, and my goal was to understand how to heal the climate as opposed to patching it up, which is what Al Gore seemed to be thinking of doing. So, so I've been looking at the system side and to understand how the system is driving us to where we are, and what we need to do to, I guess, create a new system that would be sustainable. So essentially, we identified violence, the normalized violence in the current system, as the reason for where we are headed, why we are heading this way. And therefore, we have to create a system of normalized non-violence. So, which is what the Vegan World 2026 project is about. And so we had our first meeting back in October of last year. And over 100 people came together in Mesa, Arizona to talk about what does a vegan world look like, a world of normalized nonviolence, and how do we get there? How do we make the transition? So we spent 2 days talking about this. We came up with over 250 questions that we had on these issues. And so we have another conference coming up at the end of this month in Israel, where we're going to be working on the constitution for this normalized nonviolent world. And then we are going to strategize how are we going to get the current governments to start thinking along these lines, you know, because right now they are subsidizing violence, they're subsidizing war, they're subsidizing animal foods, which are really bad for our health, bad for the animals, bad for the planet. So how do we get them to stop subsidizing animal foods and start subsidizing organic plant foods so that we all, you know, have a healthy life? So that's the focus of that conference, the summit that we're going to have. And then I have a webinar series that the first one happened on Saturday. So and if you go on our website, climatehealers.org/webinar, so the introductory talk is there on the website. And so this webinar series is about how not to go extinct. And that's the theme. And so the overview talk happened on Saturday, and I'm going to give one talk every month for the next 5 months on different aspects of this. You know.
Wow. Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dr. Rao, for all you're doing. I apologize. We seem to have dropped off here at our home on the conference for, you know, half a minute here and there. So I didn't quite catch all of it, but I definitely got the gist. And and we're so happy to have you. And I appreciate very much the suggestion of name change. I think that's a very good one. We'll probably adopt that. We'll
Thank you.
Talk about it a little bit. Yeah. And of course, the name that we have in its current version, or even in the new version, Social Club at the End of This World, it's largely to wake people up and say, right, hey, you know, big stuff is happening. And if we don't, you know, make really radical, deep changes, it will be the end of this world. And right. So, and it's also kind of a subtle play on kind of the business as usual. It's like, right, oh, you know, oh, well, it's the end of the world. Well, let's go have a social club and drink coffee, you know, at the end of the world. Ha ha ha. You know, it's like, what? Well, you know, so it points to the craziness of this time.
Right.
What's interesting, J-Man, I think what Doctor is saying, though, is that was kind of a really great beginning, but we're now entering this phase of rebirthing. And right, Jamin and I have been talking a lot about language, and language is so powerful, and that we need to change the way we use language and come back into using it in a way that's healing, that's positive, that's uplifting, and that's beautiful, because beauty is so important. And so if we change the language and change what we're putting out there, then people will start adopting and shifting into that paradigm, that consciousness, and that way of speaking and being and doing. So I love your suggestion. I think that's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you
so much. And thank you for what you're doing. That's really uplifting. I think we really need that, you know? It's like we can all get very melancholic and depressed. But as soon as we get into this creative mode, you know, co-creative mode, which you're talking about, it's a very powerful healing process and will carry us forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And talking about the meat, I have to just tell you guys an experience I had. I don't eat a lot of meat. I still eat chicken, but the other day when I went to cut the chicken, I actually physically was suffering doing it. That's the first time that's happened to me, where the knife, as it's hitting the flesh of the chicken, it was my flesh that was hurting. And I was just like, I can't eat meat any longer. This is just the end of that.
Right. Yeah. So I also have this theory called the thermostat species theory. Well, it's a hypothesis. And the hypothesis is that human beings have been basically doing the job of a thermostat species during the current interglacial period. We kept the temperature constant for the first 10,000 years accidentally through deforestation and animal agriculture. And then over the last 200 years, we have burnt up all these fossil fuels and created technologies to help us understand what we did in the first 10,000 years and now become a conscious thermostat species for the planet. And so to do that, we have to now return land back to nature. We have to basically start doing the non-violent world. We have to create a non-violent world where our interaction with life is on a non-violent basis as opposed to a violent basis. Because currently we kill more animals in 4 to 12 hours than all the humans that died in wars throughout human history put together. So that's the level of constant violence that's happening in the background of our current system. So if we then work towards that non-violent world, then the earth will recover. I mean, forests will come back, the animals will hopefully come back, the insects will hopefully come back. So this is the healing process. So I use the analogy of someone getting heart disease, going to a doctor, and the doctor says, well, either you can get a triple bypass surgery or you can go on a plant-based diet. So what do you want to do? And if he chooses a plant-based diet, literally the body starts healing from within. And for our civilization, it's as if we have not just heart disease, but we also have cancer, diabetes, obesity, all put together, right? All the diseases that can be healed with a plant-based diet, we have it in our civilization. So it's that one simple shift, this shift in our mindset to a non-violent way of thinking, a non-violent way of living, that addresses all of our issues. So it has to be the foundation of the new world, which is why I call it the Vegan World 2026 project. And 2026 comes from the fact that we are killing animals so fast that at the current rate of killing, by 2026, we are on track to wipe them all out, all the wild animals out. And so this is why Bolsonaro is destroying the Amazon. It's part of the current system, and the Congo is being destroyed as well. So we literally have to take it back and say, this is our world, this is our children's world, and we need to figure out how to create a system of normalized nonviolence. How do we get software to help us with collective intelligence? As we each one of us contribute to this nonviolent world. Anyway, I'll stop at this point.
Beautiful, Dr. Rao. Thank you so much. Wow, I'm so happy you're here. So please just keep jumping into the conversation. We're a relatively small group today. We're sometimes up to, 8, 10 people. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we normally just kind of go around the table and everyone checks in and provides an update. So Adam, Dan, please jump in whenever you're ready and provide your updates. Just whenever you're ready. Yeah, go ahead. Dan.
Yeah. So, Dan checking in from Chicago. Again, I have some laryngitis, sick with the flu, so it's going to probably affect my input, and I won't be able to, again, stay for the whole stretch. But couple of thoughts. Violence is, I agree, Dr. Rao, violence is a huge, huge problem. And one of the problems, it seems to me, with removing it is the fact that as human beings, we are hardwired to be very tribalistic, and so we have all these different kinds of tribes. And on the social club, I know I bring this up periodically. For example, right now in the world, we have very, very wealthy nations who are engaged in a tribalistic confrontation with no higher level of consciousness as to what they're really about. And I think it's probably one of the best examples today, although you can find them all over the place. But we have China, which is a very nationalistic, tribalistic country. There's the Chinese race, language, history. And it's a very, in many, many ways, a very kind of historically, a very well, I'll put it this way, a very well organized kind of a place, which has had a lot of interesting history and internal things have happened. And then we have the English-speaking Caucasian tribe, primarily the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain. And this is a tribe which right now is at loggerheads with the Chinese. And yet, there's no capacity to discuss how the tribal identities tend to drive this process. In other words, one tribe has absolutely no really, there's no capacity to trust the other tribe. It sort of becomes this game where, your tribe, if it could, would destroy my tribe, and vice versa. And this is a very, very common dynamic. And so without an ability to sort of transcend this tribalism, which needs to be deconstructed in a way which is very, very painful. And we can also say on a religious level, we see tribalism. The Chinese are not really a religious tribe, and the English-speaking, as the Chinese say, I think they call it the white supremacist 4 eyes or 5 eyes. But these are not religious, essentially, but we also have the religious kind of tribalism in the world, where we have Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, etc. And again, these tribal identities are very, very powerful mechanisms, and it makes the tribalistic stuff makes it very, very easy to justify violence. Most violence that takes place I think historically and in the world, is a result of these tribal conflicts. In other words, if your tribe is going to destroy my tribe, take everything we have, I think I'm probably justified in defending myself against you. And what we see is at this point in time, is again no ability to discuss this and to kind of take it down, because most of these ideologies, whether they're religious or nationalistic, are essentially constructed along, one final thing, and I'll let this go. The religions, we give endless respect, at least superficially, to, in the United States, we call it religious freedom, right? Everybody, let's not attack anybody's religion or anything. Let's all just live peaceably, let people worship the way they choose. But, there's a certain dynamic with the religions, where if you actually believe that based upon how you behave in this world while you're alive, you're going to go to an afterlife, which could either be quite good and rewarding or could be quite painful and very negative. That sets up an area of conflict, because if I believe that part of what makes me a good person is I'm loyal to my faith, or in some cases, maybe my nation. If that's part of how I define myself as a good person, and not only that, I believe that somehow in an afterlife, I'm going to suffer consequences or gain rewards as a result of that, then I'm going to be very, very hostile towards any ideology or belief system that's going to cause me and my loved ones to end up in, hell or some variant of that. So I just throw this out here and because I think that, again, when you really look at violence, most of it, there's plenty of violence, that results from inability to control your emotions, where people end up hurting one another and fighting and all sorts of things that go on. But the vast majority of serious violence results from wars between these large tribal groupings. And I think that it's essential to deconstruct it and to be able to say, you can't believe in an afterlife that posits heaven and hell or some variant of that. Because if you do, you have to then acknowledge how that sets up a very unfortunate kind of conflict. In other words, if I let you, you look at the religions, they have, if you're a heretic or you commit apostasy or something, in many religions historically and some today, that's a death sentence. Why is that? Because we can't allow our people to suffer in the afterworld and so on. We have to protect them here so they don't get hurt later. And so I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I would take one this final thing, and I'll shut up. So I've always, kind of felt that when we have these beliefs that are, in a sense, triggers for violence. You just look historically; it's there. It's empirical evidence of it, and you're not willing to discard these beliefs, to be able to say, well, this is what I believe, this is what I was imprinted with, but I have to understand that it leads to violence, and we need to discuss that, and maybe we need to, change some of our beliefs, because, if a belief is something which basically once you have it, it's very hard to let it go. And if you are normally just presented with evidence, you'll minimize or rationalize it away if it violates your belief. And you know, we just have to get to it. So I'm going to go ahead and shut up, but I did want to throw that in there concerning the violence. Thank you.
Good stuff, Dan. Thank you so much. And Adam, please feel free to jump in anytime. I just want to comment. It's really interesting that we're talking about violence, which is not a topic that we normally bring up on the Social Club, but just to comment that I began my public activism, like public meaning on the streets of Seattle. We're in the state of Washington. Almost 2 years ago, with a campaign against organized crime, and specifically criminal drug cartels operating here in the state of Washington. And part of that was on a hypothesis that violence is actually a topic that unites us in the following way. If we as a people, Americans or any group, Washingtonians, you know, any group, perceives that there is an enemy tribe that's coming to hurt us, that wakes us up immediately. And what we had noticed about climate change was that it sort of lacked that enemy tribe aspect. And that was one of the reasons that I started a whole campaign in the state of Washington to get the criminal drug cartels out of the state of Washington, thinking that we might be able to unite people around getting rid of organized crime, and that once we get people united around that, we can then gradually expand the focus from organized crimes against people to organized crimes against our Mother Earth. So I just wanted to comment on that. And because a general theme that we've been exploring is how do we actually get humanity to unite around something, right? And even if the focus of our uniting evolves over time, as I think it must, how do we start, right? We're so fragmented. There are so many different points of view, so many different manifestos, so many different books, so many different organizations that have different areas of focus. I'll talk about some of the ones that we've been involved in and are currently involved in. But I just want to put out as a general question and challenge to us all: how do we come together? How do we get united? A few weeks ago, Melissa and I were at a Sierra Club dinner in California that we organized that was on the topic of our arcology and architecture and ecology, and transforming our entire set of living arrangements as human beings to be much more symbiotic with nature, with the natural world. And after Michael Gosney's presentation, about 20 of us or so stayed around for an after presentation discussion. And one of the main themes of that was, look, we've got, tens of thousands of different nonprofit organizations, each with different areas of focus. And a professor of political science and public policy was there. And he made the comment that if you add up all the nonprofits in the world, we constitute basically a superpower, but a superpower that's incredibly dysfunctional because we are not organized, united, pulling in the same direction. You've got Save the Seals, you've got Save the Whales, you've got the vegans, you've got, the peace people, you've got the meditation people, the permaculture people, the climate change, so many different. How do we get united? And of course, the big vision that I wake up with every morning and go to bed with every night is the vision of a united humanity using a collective intelligence. Not that we necessarily agree on everything, but that we have a platform that enables us to all plug in and with the judicious application of artificial intelligence and other information and communication technologies, this platform will use the metaphor of a loom, like to weave together fabric or tapestry, where each of us brings, one or more threads of unique contribution that are unique to us as the individual. And the platform essentially serves as like a giant loom that provides the structure and system and processes to help us weave together these different threads. So those are my comments for the moment. I'll go on mute. I say we just let people jump in. And normally, Dr. Rao, just so you know, when we have 10 people, we'll actually have a queuing system where you actually type your name into the chat window, but we'll forego that today and just let people jump in. So I'll go on mute and just jump in. Anyone, anytime.
Yeah, Jamin, just again, another thought and something that I focus on a lot. First, just let me, bring back the issue of abrupt climate change, exponential climate change. So if it's the case that we are now in the more initial stage of an exponential increase in the average global temperature, which is a premise that we tend to assume, then, time is limited, and strategies that are very useful when it comes to a linear function in terms of average global temperature have to be watched very, very carefully, because there isn't time. And so, for example, maybe, something will intervene, something will happen, and we will not have to endure the exponential increase. But at this point in time, without talking about it as a reasonable probability, it's just kind of like it precludes actions or strategies, ideas that may be very, very useful. And we're thrown against the fear that people have, that we all have. It's hard to even imagine. I remember watching Guy McPherson some years ago, when he was in New Zealand. I forget the guy's, he had kind of a conservative kind of talk show, and Guy McPherson was there talking to this guy. I can't forget, his name might have been Paul, but some of you may have seen that. And the guy goes, you may be right. It all sounds pretty rational, what you have to say, but there's no way I can possibly conceive of all this not being here. And that gets right to the heart of part of the problem. If you can't imagine and you can't accept the possibility, not the necessary outcome, but the possibility that it all goes, and then it's very, very hard to mobilize the appropriate energy. And so I just want to, respect that, the exponential, the reasonable probability that we're dealing with exponential increase. And that is kicked in by all of the self-reinforcing feedback loops that are now in play. And we have no discussion of it. It's essentially censored out. And this is the last thing that I want to, we have a corporate control of all mainstream media outlets. I don't know, what is there, 5 or 6 corporations now control it all. And they have their own corporate interests that they are concerned with. And that means keeping the fossil fuel going on, and keeping the, for a small segment of the world, the very, very lucrative good times rolling. But this control of the media, these media people, in our country, we have Rachel Maddow on MSNBC. A lot of progressive people think she's wonderful. We have Sean Hannity on Fox News. A lot of people who are progressive detest Sean Hannity. And then we have, and we've got Anderson Cooper on CNN. There's a bunch of them. But they're all under corporate control. And they will never go against a corporate interest because they know they will be removed from their celebrity position and all the wealth and fame that goes with it. And it's a huge stumbling block because nothing meaningful or realistic can really be discussed at this point in time without going against corporate interests. And so most people, one of the biggest frustrations I have, I posted something the other day, just basically, and I've started to do it, where I'm saying, Rachel Maddow is as much of a problem as Sean Hannity. Even though, again, I know progressives love Rachel Maddow. I used to love Rachel Maddow. I used to love the comedian Bill Maher. He was my favorite comedian at one time. I can't tolerate him now. I can't stomach him because of where he's gotten to, and he is just essentially somebody who will not cross corporate interests in any meaningful way. And he's, he's associated with the Democratic Party. The establishment Democratic Party is no better than the establishment Republican Party. And most people don't understand these kind of things. And you hear the thing about being in a matrix. I mean, if you really start breaking it down, thinking about it, we are in kind of a matrix of reality, and it's very, very hard to take it down. I would recommend, even though it's absurd, that everybody just simply stop watching these cable news shows and anything else that's really put out there by the corporate media. Wean yourself away from it. Give up the sports. Give up, the celebrity worship and all of this kind of thing. And try to reconstitute yourself according to things that are really meaningful at this point in time. And Mother Earth is obviously empirically being destroyed. And in my mind, when I go to a place where, I start remembering, because I'm old enough to remember a very, very different time. And when I was a kid, I spent some of my childhood in kind of rural areas. And that beauty that used to exist is no longer available. And it is a beautiful planet that we did have, and we took it for granted. And of course, now we're in the end times. And so anyway, I wanted to just throw those thoughts out there into the conversational mix. Thank you.
Beautiful, Dan. Thank you. All right.
Hey, I'll jump in, I guess.
Yeah, welcome, Adam. Yeah. How you doing?
Hey, Jamin, Melissa, Dr. Rao, and Dan. Can you hear me all okay? Okay, good. Yeah, so I think that I like what Dr. Rao said about veganism, and I like what Jamin said about establishing a platform. So I think that veganism is part of the answer. I mean, there's a lot of different things that we have to do. We have to refreeze the Arctic. We have to deal with carbon sequestration. I mean, there's just, the list just goes on and on. Radiation, just name it, and it just goes on and on. And what we don't have is a comprehensive plan that'll help us get through all this, to figure it all out. And we're never gonna. One thing that Dan said, alluded to, was that people are, like the mass media and stuff, they're all stuck in their own ways, and we're not going to change them. I don't think we can change them. But what we can do is build a plan in virtual reality. It's just like if you were going to build a skyscraper. I've said this before. You have to build the skyscraper first in virtual reality. In virtual reality, you put all those parts and pieces together. So you have a different section. You have a section for refreezing the Arctic. You have a section for how dealing with radiation. You have a section with food and how to eat and how to, and on this platform that Jamin's talking about, people can come there and express their own opinions and their own ideas, and the collective intelligence can assimilate all that and put these plans together. And I think that after we build this set of plans, then mankind will have something to look at and say, well, hey, there is a plan here. It's like, it's this set of plans for building the skyscraper. It's comprehensive. It talks about all of it. So that's the point I wanted to make. Thanks.
Thank you, Adam. Really glad you're here, buddy. I wanted to talk about kind of what we're focused on recently. It's all in the direction of building the collective intelligence, but it addresses the question, as has been raised, how do we assemble this critical mass of united humanity that can come together and basically do what the five of us are doing here today, is to convene and talk about it. Now, this is one sort of general, discussion where we touch on a lot of different topics, and that's how the social club is designed. It's, come as you are, talk about basically whatever you want to talk about that's relevant to the main topic. But of course, we envision a whole matrix of conversations. In my ideal utopian world, we'll have tens of thousands of conversations happening in parallel. As Adam said, some are focused on refreezing the Arctic, others are focused on transforming our food system to be vegan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And together, all of those conversations in this whole community constitutes this giant collective brain that we envision. Not just a collective brain, a collective consciousness, a collective heart, ultimately a collective spirit, recognizing that we are all one. And when each of our brains is part of this larger neural network, so instead of a neuron being the node, it's the human brain being the node for those of us who are alive. And then artifacts of information of those who have come before, whether they're books or technical papers or designs or whatever it may be. And then, of course, the giant loom weaving this all together. And that's all a very beautiful picture, and it will remain an abstract, beautiful, hypothetical possibility until and unless we actually find a practical on-ramp to that whole new modality. And with that in mind, Adam and I and Melissa and Jamie and a number of other colleagues, with great support from Dan and the rest of the social club and this broader community, we've engaged on some specific actions and missions. One of which going back to last August and September, we all got together and dressed up in professional Star Wars costumes. I was dressed as Darth Vader, and we did a sustained month-long action at the Microsoft campus here in the state of Washington, where I used to work for a number of years. I was corporate strategy manager. And so we had these giant signs one that's had the Death Star, and it said abrupt climate change on the Death Star, and it was shooting this giant laser beam at Mother Earth, and it said abrupt climate change. Which side are you on? And then another big poster that had Princess Leia beckoning as if to Obi-Wan Kenobi, saying, "Help us, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're our only hope." But it said, "Help us, Satya Nadella, you're our only hope," the CEO of Microsoft. And I know Satya, have a lot of respect for him. And so we were here very publicly inviting, even challenging Microsoft. As we said, you know, we had professional sound system, speaker, everything, music. I was singing Spanish love songs all day long. And we're basically, the message was to the entire technology sector, starting with Microsoft, is techies, get into the game. Get into the game of finding solutions to our biggest problems, including the extinction of life on Earth. Get into the game by building the platform, building the Loom, right? Which we've been working on as a small organization, Radish, kind of chipping away at it, but we need, you know, much greater involvement, engagement from the tech sector to build the platform. So get in the game for building the platform, get in the game for helping to build technical solutions among the many solutions that we need. So that was one big initiative we did back for the whole month of September. And seeing that no one from the tech sector was stepping forward to engage, we said, all right, you know, what's missing? You know, what are we doing wrong? If not the tech sector, who? And then we shifted gears and started lobbying the Catholic Church, given that Pope Francis published this amazing encyclical in 2015, Laudato Si, on care for our common home. So basically our message to the Catholic Church is, hey, your boss's 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 boss said this is urgent and we all need to come together and do this, so let's do it. And so we've written up this whole big proposal for the Catholic Church, and we're now in the process of moving that whole movement forward. We're about to start a big public campaign in support of Pope Francis, who is under attack by a lot of people, both inside and outside the Catholic Church. So we're going to do this whole big public campaign and take it to the Catholic colleges, universities, and high schools to get students involved and engaged in supporting Pope Francis and in participating in the dialogue that he's asking all of us to get involved with, like we're doing right here, right now, but at a much larger scale, as I was saying. And we so along the way, we've come up with these hypotheses, why isn't humanity waking up, and what will it take for humanity to wake up? So since I worked at Microsoft for a number of years, I have firsthand experience of what it's like to be inside the bubble where, you're making lots of money and you're doing these big things that lots of people are using, and, your ego just goes up and up and up and up. And we become kind of blinded by this ego. So our hypothesis, we actually formed a hypothesis that we're wasting our time with the Microsofties and with the techies because they're too blinded by money and power and technology and the magic of all this. So that's what got us focused more on the religious front, because religious people have faith, right? And their faith and their religious practices often help to counterbalance the ego, the hubris. And so our current hypothesis, we always have a hypothesis. Our current hypothesis is that by going to the young people within the church, college students, high school students, these are people with, different from all of us who are a bit older. We've all lived. We've had beautiful lives. These young people are just starting out, and they want to get married. They want to have children. They want to live a good life. And we're saying, hey, all of this is at risk, and we need you. We all need to come together if we're going to preserve life and have a chance for you to have a chance at getting married, having children, having a beautiful life. So let's follow our leader, Pope Francis, speaking directly to the Catholics. And one of the beautiful things about Pope Francis is he is reaching out to other religions. So he's reached out to Muslim leaders, leaders of all different religions. And that's part of why he's getting attacked by people within the Catholic Church who say, no, don't talk to those Muslims, right? Just stay focused on Catholic doctrine. So Pope Francis is taking a truly radical approach. And we believe that by really promoting him as a leader for solving the world's problems, we can make some radical changes happen and unite. There's 1.2 billion Catholics. Imagine even if only 10% of them got seriously engaged in this conversation and this collective intelligence, that'd be 120 million people, right? These are big numbers with big potential. So, but again, so I'm just sharing where we're coming from, Melissa and I and others within our group. But the big question remains, how are we going to unite humanity and get us all moving in one direction, whether it's vegan 2026 or whether it's refreeze the Arctic or whether it's shut down nuclear? I prefer that it be all the above. But regardless of whether it's one direction or a composite direction, how do we get humanity to unite and organize?
Can I jump in?
Please.
I'd like to answer that, in my opinion. So, right, you've been, like Jamin, you've been going after the Catholic Church, which is good, and I'm not putting you down for that or anything. But it seems like we could start this website without their help. I mean, there aren't any websites out there that actually start putting the plan set together. And, like you could have a section for refreezing the Arctic, and then that section could have different, schemes for refreezing the Arctic. And then you could have a section for, well, how does man, where are we going to get food? So you could have a section in there for veganism and telling, and eventually, you could have all these different individual, you could set it all up. And then it would be a place of attraction and people would come there to start building this and start actually building it in reality, in virtual reality. Without vision, we're lost. And this is the way to create a vision. I think we can do it without the Catholic Church's help. Because I think that people, if we just build it and just start it, just get it going, I think people will join and come. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Just to reiterate, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. To reiterate something I said earlier. If you don't deconstruct the matrix, then we're all in. It's going to be very hard to accomplish anything. Here in the United States, where we are, essentially, all that we have going on for, ever since Trump got in and even before then, it's this endless divide and conquer, tribalistic stuff. And it just simply, nothing will go anywhere as long as we remain on this level. So we have, I notice all the time, anything that has to do with identity politics, whether it's about racism, sexism, whatever, that's okay, not a problem. Identity issues, just go at it. And what you have is you have a country here that's totally divided. on these kinds of issues. And, you know, we also have false ideologies, you know, like kind of the neoliberal, neoconservative mix, which runs, you know, which justifies the tremendous inequality of wealth here in this country and other places. This is part of the matrix, and you got to take it down. You know, I still remember, you know, I remember back in the late 1960s and early 70s when I was at Berkeley. And I remember that back in those days, the matrix was being taken down. It was nothing, you know, it was nothing resembling the overbearing strength of the current matrix. But it was there, and it was being taken down. Progressive people back in those days understood that the authority figures who kind of manipulated the news and the propaganda were essentially working for, you know, the corporate interests, the elites. It was well understood. And even though today you have kind of a little bit of that consciousness, you got to notice back in 2011, when we had the Occupy movement here in the United States, there was, for a brief moment in time, kind of a going back to what there used to be in the late 1960s, mid 1960s, late 60s, early 70s, that put a stop to the Vietnam War, which was an outrage, just on so many levels. And so, you know, you kind of went back to it in a sense of, hey, the inequality, the systems, the neoliberal, neocon synthesis, which took over in 1980 with Reagan and Thatcher in England, that this was no longer something we could bow down to and kind of argue within that framework. But you know what? That was what was taken down very, very quickly, because the corporate media knows how to do that. They understand propaganda at a very, very high level. Organizations like the Central Intelligence Agency, which by this time has pretty much infiltrated practically everything on a high level. You know, Rachel Maddow and Sean Hannity, they have their special, you know, areas of interest and, you know, their own tribalistic concerns, but they know perfectly well that up at the editorial level, where they end up with the censorship, that is completely controlled. And we have to understand that. And to, again, in my opinion, it needs to really be taken down and eventually just boycott it. And that may be, you know, totally unrealistic. You know, I appreciate that, but I don't think you get anywhere, because we have the, you know, whether it's tribalistic violence, which is ginned up, you know, I mean, we have, you know, if you look at it in a very basic way, it's always been historically, how do so few control so many? You know, I mean, how does that happen? You have to use some version of divide and conquer. Oh, let's use, you know, race. That's a great one. You know, we've got this race over here, that race, you know, let's go to that. Or we can use religions, you know, and we can use sexual preferences. There's no end to the identity tribalism that can be ginned up. They love that. And if you notice, if you just sort of look at the political realities, you can see here, like, you know, in Chicago, for example, our mayor who's not running for a third term, Rahm Emanuel. Well, he's, you know, nobody is more immersed in, nobody's more of a financial predator, neoliberal, neocon person than Rahm Emanuel. But, you know, when it comes to identity stuff, oh, he's all good with that. Yeah, we can't have racism. We can't have discrimination against sexual preference. We can't have this. We can't. But the one thing that he won't tolerate, again, is anything that goes against corporate interests. And, you know, at the threat of your job if you happen to be under his influence. So we need to go there and find a way to break the matrix down. That's it. My voice is gone. I'm done.
All right. Thank you, Dan. And I want to welcome Miles, who just joined us from Calgary, Canada. And we have a new special guest, Dr. Rao. I think, Dr. Rao, you've been wanting to comment. So let's let Dr. Rao comment. Take your time. And then Miles, love to hear from you after that. And I know Melissa also wants to talk. Go ahead, Dr. Rao.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jamin. I mean, you all have made such very good points. And so I wanted to sort of thread it together because I've been studying this for 12 years now, and I have written a couple of books on this. You know, we started a campaign a few days ago. It was announced, called the $1 Million Vegan Campaign. I don't know if anyone has heard of that. It was directed to Pope Francis.
$1 million what? Sorry?
Vegan.
Vegan.
$1
Okay.
Million Vegan Campaign. So it was a letter written by a 12-year-old girl to Pope Francis, asking him to go vegan for Lent for 40 days, starting March 6th until Easter. And if he does that, we are going to donate $1 million to a charity of his choice. Okay. So far, he has not responded to that yet, but it received so much publicity, that simple campaign, that it was the top trending news for 2 days after we announced it. And then I did I've been executive producer of a number of movies, documentaries. The Human Experiment was the first one, and then Cowspiracy, The Sustainability Secret, and What the Health. And the new one that we are releasing on March 5th, the day before Lent, is called A Prayer for Compassion. So A Prayer for Compassion looks at the commonality of compassion for all life, as the common thread that unites all religions. Okay, so this is the thread through which we are looking at. We asked leaders from every religion to address it. And they all said, yeah, compassion for all life is foundational to our religion. So this documentary is around that. But there we highlight inconsistencies, such as Pope Francis saying it's contrary to human dignity to cause animals to suffer or die needlessly, and then eating a veal and lobster dinner. So we ask why, why is he doing that? Is he also suffering? Because when you do something that's contrary to who you really are, you suffer. So, I mean, just like what Melissa was saying, and so we are premiering that on March 5th, the day before Lent. So if he announces that he's going vegan, then we're going to remove that clip out. And if he doesn't accept the challenge, we're going to highlight that clip, and then we are going to then ask Dalai Lama or someone else to go vegan. So the challenge moves to someone else. So the idea behind this is to unite people around this common theme of compassion for all life, and to unite people around this common story of the thermostat species, that we all are, we are all being put on Earth for a particular purpose, which is to maintain the climate for the rest of creation, so that we don't have to ever go back to another ice age. Okay, so that's the premise. And that we have been doing it for 10,000 years unconsciously, and now we have to just continue doing that consciously. And so uniting people around a theme, so that the tribalism doesn't kill us. I mean, literally, the tribalism is how the matrix has been built up, the divide and conquer approach. We know this, I mean, this is the exact same thing that the British were doing in India. And it's just become much more formalized now, and it's much more automatic, and it's global. We have the exact same education system that the British had imposed on us. And And so literally everyone is being educated to become a bureaucratic administrator for the empire. That's really what is going on now, right? So it's about changing that, and and I think rather than trying to fight it, I suggest we build something new that people can adopt and say, no, I would prefer to be there, which is the idea behind Vegan World 2026, is to build a complete set of collaterals around a system of normalized nonviolence. And so the first thing that we did in the conference was to ask people to come up with questions. And it turns out that when people come up with questions, they come at it from different perspectives. And then when you start rating those questions, you see the collective intelligence of the group bubble up. And so I'm really looking for a software platform where it will be like Quora, but rather than rating answers, you're rating questions alone. And it's only questions. And questions centered around this new system of normalized nonviolence. Okay. And so I need a web app for that. And if you go look at veganworld2026.org, you'll see the questions that we came up with. And that was done in 2 days, physically together. And if you can imagine people just adding to that and rating the questions, and then asking questions about the questions. So each question then you can create a council around that question. Like, what question could be, how do we refreeze the Arctic? That's the major question. Then underneath that, you have sub-questions, So a web app for doing something like that would be awesome. And that's something that I've been looking to figure out, how do we do this, right?
Beautiful. Well, we've been doing the same thing. We've been working on designing essentially a web app for collective intelligence. We've been focusing on different facets. I really love what you're saying about questions and questions about questions and breaking it down. That's really very, very complementary to what we've been working on. So
okay.
love to collaborate with you on that, Dr. Rao. And there's also a writer based in London, a very influential guy. The name escapes me at the moment, but I'll send you the link to an article that he wrote about collective intelligence and perspective, and how, kind of a systematic process that he was working on for how we can bring together our different perspectives. So I'd in fact love to get on with you and him and other thought leaders about collective intelligence. And I just love that this is bubbling up as a meme and a theme of collective intelligence to address all this. Wow, great stuff.
Yeah,
love this conversation that we got going on. I'm in no hurry to end it, actually. So, and sweetie, you've been very patient. Please jump
I
in.
would just like to read a quote by St. Francis of Assisi. Start by doing what is necessary, then what is possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible. Dr. Rao, I really love what you're doing. Very inspiring. Just feeding off that quote from St. Francis, one thing I wanted to encourage people to do is even little gestures, little things that have a huge impact. And we're so used to this thinking that we have to do something big. It's kind of feeding our ego and become these heroes and these superstars. But actually these little things that we can do that are very coming from compassion and humility can connect us to nature and actually have a huge impact. Jamin and I were in San Francisco, and there's plastic garbage everywhere. And similar to the not being able to cut through the chicken anymore without suffering, I also cannot walk past plastic without suffering. I cannot do it. So as a garbage bag, it's blowing down the beach towards us. We catch it. And we spent the 3 days in San Francisco picking up plastic garbage. And what was remarkable, obvious, but not also obvious, was that the birds around us were signaling to us how happy they were that we were collecting this garbage from their natural habitats. And we witnessed 2 ravens on the beach doing a love dance. And they were very much communicating that to us. I've never seen ravens, and I'm adopted into the Raven clan of the Haida Nation. So I'm very connected to ravens. I've never witnessed a raven love dance, but they were celebrating the removal of plastic from the beach. So I just would encourage everyone, do something, even little. Start by doing what is necessary. Plant, clean up, feed the animals. Let's not let our brothers and sisters go hungry. Feed the birds, feed the starving animals. We must have a different consciousness about this, not just taking care of self, but taking care of the whole world. And then suddenly there's a shift that happens and the impossible happens. Healing, well-being, balance is restored. So I'm going to leave you with those thoughts. Thank you.
Beautiful. Oh, wow. Wonderful conversation. Jump in, everyone. Miles, haven't heard from you. Welcome to jump in anytime. And Dr. Rao, it's so wonderful to hear your perspectives. It's like a breath of fresh air into the social club. So very happy that you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll send you some links, and then you can share it with others if you can. There's also a document that we have created on eco-governance, and to create a constitution, a draft constitution for Vegan World 2026. I'll send you that document as well.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Hello, I'll jump in and say hello. And to follow up on what Daniel was saying about tribalism, interesting. I was at a session yesterday with shall we say, a think tank, and a lot of corporate sponsorship of this think tank. And indeed, one of the repeated messages was, you have to, if you're going to go talk to a group about, they say climate change, I prefer to say ecological emergency. If you're going to go and talk about climate change, you have to be a member of that group in order to, because they were stressing it's the messenger that's as important as the message. And to me, that just smacks of what Daniel's been talking about, that the powers that be want to keep us siloed. They don't want us talking, as, say, yourselves, as Americans to Americans, whether you're young or you're old. That's reprehensible to impress upon people that, if you're not youth, you can't talk to youth. That is absolute BS. And that's keeping people separated into their tribes, because it's divide and conquer. So don't fall for that. I totally agree. And in fact, interestingly enough, I've been engaging with First Nations here in Canada, and I've never felt them give me that message. Their messaging, when you tune into so many of their YouTube videos or their presentations, they're always talking about, we are all one. And we need to recognize that there's strength in our diversity, and that elders need to work with the youth, and that settlers or non-Indigenous need to work with the Indigenous. The thing is that we have to give credit where it's due and recognize that their Indigenous wisdom of sharing, that type of an economy, is what we have to move to. This industrial growth society where we've been convinced to, purchase unhealthy food like Dr. Ra's been talking about, you know, and I have to admit this word vegan is really a new word to me, and I have to learn a lot to understand it. But so much of what he says, thank you to Jeff for sending me a link to his most recent introductory broadcast about, you know, humans need to become the thermostat species, is just wonderful. And I'm really looking forward to the next videos that he's going to be posting. So it makes a lot of sense. And I hope that Radish can work with Dr. Ra to get that platform up and running. So anyway, thanks everybody. I'll turn it over to someone else now. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Yeah, please just jump in, everyone, anytime. We're just having an open discussion, and silence is also okay. So,
well, this will be my, sorry, can't jump in. I'm going to, my voice is just too far gone. I'm going to say goodbye at this point. I'll see you next week.
Great to see you. Hope you feel better. Take care. Take care.
Yeah, get well, Dan. Sorry.
Oh, no, you go ahead, sweetie. Yeah.
Dr. Ra, I was just looking at your book, The Carbon Dharma, which looks really fantastic. I'm going to order that. I love this, using the metaphor of Earth as butterflies to undo the damage done by a human species. I just wanted to share, I'm an artist, and this is a recent piece of art that I made with a friend, and they're butterflies. It's all out of upcycle, so it's plastic bottles, chicken wire that was found, and butterflies that I made for another public art installation that I pulled apart and repurposed. And it's really showing the impact that we're having on nature. So I just found that kind of interesting. This idea that we're in this cocoon stage of metamorphosis, transforming ourselves into taking flight as butterflies into this new way of living in the world, and on the earth. So I'll look forward to reading that.
Wow.
I'll just jump in quickly. Something came to mind. I highly recommend everyone go to TV Ontario. There's a program called The Agenda, and they are talking about femicide, the actual death of, or the killing of women for the sake of being women. And it occurred to me that actually, you know, when you think of Mother Earth being killed, it's a form of femicide. And I think that's where, you know, as I mentioned, as a man, I actually have to go in and be part of that conversation. You know, even though I'm not a woman, I have to be part of that conversation, and that's part of being, you know, a citizen of Mother Earth.
Good. Thank you, Miles. You know, so much is coming up, and I'm just so impressed by and thankful for all that you and your organization are doing, Dr. Rao. Where are you located physically, Dr.
Rao? I'm located in Phoenix, Arizona. To me, it's symbolic of the, you know, resurgence of Earth.
Yeah, Phoenix Rising. Yeah.
My granddaughter was born here. That's why we moved here. And she's 1/4 African American, 1/4 American Indian, and half South Asian. So,
wow.
To me, she represents all of humanity. You know, in one simple package.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, man. I would love to invite you I would just love to work with you, continue this collaboration and expand it, because we're all forming this community,
Right.
and I think it can grow very, very quickly. In fact, I'd love to have you. I'm program chair of the East Bay Sierra Club dinners that we hold in Berkeley, and would love to have you out as a speaker, and to make a presentation, and then we can finally meet in person. And
I would love to do that.
Great. So let's talk about that. And also with our campaign to go to some major Catholic universities, colleges, high schools, and really get the groundswell up in support of Pope Francis, and also inviting Pope Francis, recruiting him to be a leader for the vegan movement, for the entire environmental movement, because he has the clout. Like when he reached out to, the major Muslim leaders in the Middle East, they accepted his invitation, right? It's very hard to say no to the Pope. Very hard to ignore the Pope. So we really see that Pope Francis and the Catholic Church is this sleeping giant that can wake up and really help lead the world and invite other religions on a very egalitarian basis. I mean, that's one of the beauties of Pope Francis. He's able to reach out to other people and just meet with them on the same level, which is exactly what we need. So I see huge potential here.
I have a question for Dr. Ra, and
Rao, Miles.
Rao. Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
And it just occurred to me that thinking of the thermostat, the temperature regulation of Mother Earth, and thinking of Mother Earth as a person, and thinking of my own body, that if my temperature goes up, what is it, a few degrees, and then I have what we call a fever. I'm running a fever, and it almost seems that the Earth itself is that sensitive too. It's just a matter of a couple of degrees Celsius, and our Mother Earth is sick. And there's all these coincidences. Well, I guess they're not coincidences. Of how our own bodies function in rhythm or synchronicity synchronized with Earth functions. Women, and go with the period of the moon and such. So anyway, I was just wondering, is it really very similar? The temperature problem, or the temperature range, that we can easily become sick as a planet.
Absolutely. In fact, that's the analogy that Alan Weissman used in his book. And it's pretty accurate. If you look at 1 degree C increase in temperature, what happens to human body and what happens to the Earth? 2 degrees C, what happens to human body? What happens to the Earth? You see very similar things happening. And if it's 6 degree increase in C, it's like we had a 6 degree C increase of our body temperature. We would pretty much die. So the Earth would also die. And that's because, you see, if you look at the time scale, over 3 million years, the Earth has had huge changes in temperature. So she's gone to an ice age and come out of an ice age, gone to an ice age again. It's gone through an ice age like over 100 times, in the last 3 million years. But there, the temperature changes happen very slowly. So the Earth is able to evolve. Life is able to evolve. But when it happens very quickly, over the last 100 years, it's a very sharp change in temperature. Then it's like a fever, because the Earth does not have time to evolve out of that. And so that's an indication to us that that things are going too fast, that we need to change. We need to bring it back to the original thermostat setting. So this is the hypothesis. The hypothesis is that the Earth has gone through so many of these ice ages in the recent past, over the past 3 million years, that she evolved a species that can prevent this ice age from ever happening again, which is us. And we did that initially through deforestation. We prevented the Earth from going back to another ice age 5,000 years ago. And so through deforestation, we have actually increased the temperature on Earth by about 1.5 degrees C. Okay. And then over the last 200 years, we've increased it by another 1 degree C. That previous 1.5 degrees C was good for the Earth because it kept the temperature constant. And the recent one is not good for the Earth. But that fever was essential for us to figure out what we were doing. And then for us to become conscious thermostat species. See, the idea is that life always creates conditions conducive to life. So I say, how is it possible that there is one species that is out of, that's out of sync with that, right? I says, no, it should be that we are also in sync with that, except we don't yet understand what our role was. So the hypothesis is that this is our role in the ecosystem, is to be the thermostat species for the planet. And we can all coalesce around this, no matter where we are from. It's a common story that links us all.
Something to really work forward towards increasing the vegetation on the planet is to actually even start right in the cities. Right. I'm in the city of Calgary, which is on the prairie, but it's actually one of the few cities that adds vegetation to the landscape. Now, maybe that's not really long-term sustainable, but indeed there's more trees here because of the city than there would be on the prairie. Mm-hmm. And thinking of our ecology, Jamin, that cities could actually potentially be the first places of increasing the amount of plants and reforestation and setting the example. That's one thought about ecology, our ecologies. And then another thought, Jamin, your compassionate cafes, community cafes, are they vegan, or have you ever considered taking them vegan and actually making them into vegan training centers?
Yeah, so up until now, we've cast them as, and Dr. Rao, just, community cafes, this is a concept that we pioneered in Southern California to feed everyone nutritious foods and make nutritious foods a basic human right, as a first step towards making all basic human needs basic human rights, so that we don't feel like we need to hoard in order for us and our children, right, and grandchildren to be okay, etc. Now, but built into it from its very inception was that the foods for community cafes would be sourced from regenerative agriculture. And I've been influenced a lot, for better or for worse, and I'm willing to be influenced in a different direction, but I've been influenced a lot by the work of Alan Savory around holistic land management. And of course, he is a proponent of the vital ecosystem role that animals play, including livestock. So I sort of have this kind of contradictory notions in my head. On the one hand, I totally understand the arguments of veganism. On the other hand, I've been very influenced by Alan Savory and holistic land management, where animals play a regenerative role, especially in prairies, savannas, areas that are semi-arid and desertifying. They can help reverse desertification. Now, should we eat those animals? That's a whole different question, of the question of, do we let them play their ecosystem services roles? And I'll just turn it over to Dr. Rao, since I'm sure you've thought about this way more than I have.
Yeah, it's always best to let the native fauna in that area do that role, as opposed to bringing our livestock in to do that role. So it could be Tule elk in say the Bay Area. They do a better job than cows, at the regenerating the land. So when it's native, and when it's the native fauna that do that role, then the question of eating them goes away, right? You don't have to. And so that's why, see, if you look at the total amount of land area that we are currently using for agriculture, it's about 50% of the land area of the planet. Okay, and 3/4 of that can be returned back to nature if we all go vegan. Okay, and then of course we have to then help the 3/4 to store more carbon. We may have to intervene and do more permaculture to bring back the forests and make them healthy. Yeah. So there are a lot of it's a very holistic problem, but I think it starts with understanding why are we here, and to give us a place, right? A place in the ecosystem that we can say, yes, we do belong in nature, and we do belong exactly as we are. We are going through our caterpillar phase where we did all this work, and then now we are in the cocoon. We have to metamorphosize into this butterfly and transition to this non-violent way of relating to all life, compassionate way of living, which to me is about coming home to who we really are. Okay, because fundamentally we are all compassionate at our core, except for maybe 0.5% of our species that are psychopathic, and so which we have to treat them as opposed to give them positions of power, which is what we have done so far.
Brilliant.
There's a little story that Chief Lee Crowchild shared. He's the exec GG of the Tsuut'ina Nation next door here to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, on Treaty 7 territory. And he told a story of a forest fire, and all the animals are fleeing the forest fire, but there's a hummingbird that goes and gets a little bit of water into its beak and flies into the fire to put the little drop of water on the fire. And he's going back and forth, and a wolf stops him and says, you can't go in there. And then the hummingbird zips around him, dekes him out, and goes and drops to the water, and returns to get some more, and has to then get by a bear, and the bear tries to stop him too. Says, you're going to get killed. You can't go back into the fire. And on it goes. I'm not telling it as well as Chief Lee Crowchild did, but finally one of the animals stops the hummingbird and says, well, why are you doing that? And it's because it might make a difference. Every little bit helps, and that's to what Dr. Rao was talking about. Why are we here? And if we can encourage everybody, as he's saying, 7.75 billion of us to think as each of us being a little hummingbird, that we can do a little bit times 7.75 billion, that turns out to be a massive influence for the better. And so, I'm excited about learning more about veganism, and we do eat less meat, but now I need to really think about, how much am I, dairy is Dr. Rao talks about, dairy is actually maybe worse than the beef industry. There's a lot of meat products are generated from the dairy cow after its useful life is finished. Plus, there's just a crazy amount of cheese and butter that is purchased to be taken off of the market and then just dumped to keep the prices inflated. And so that's a fascinating thing that I never had heard of until watching his latest seminar on the subject. And it's just massive amounts of beef and meat as well that are stockpiled and pulled off the market to keep prices up, and then just dumped. So,
Dr. Rao, I wanted to address something that you said. You said you asked the question, how is it possible that one species could be out of sync? Well, I wrote the Road to Life plan. If you go to roadtolifeplan.com, you get the links to that, and I've made YouTube videos. So I have a hypothesis in the Road to Life plan, and that hypothesis is that animals in nature do not foul their own nests, but mankind has been fouling his own nest. So you said, how is it possible that one species could go out of sync? How could all the other life live in, in harmony, basically, with the earth, but mankind goes out of sync? And I'm saying that the reason we've done this is because one of the fruits we ate off the tree of knowledge was a poison, and that poison is money. And money is, so if you think about it, basically the reasons we have this giant meat and dairy industry is for money. The reason the reason we foul our own nest is because of money. And so I think if we look at that, and it really changes your perspective on how to deal with this. And I wanted to mention two other things real quickly. In this website that we're talking about building that James put together with a platform, what we're essentially doing is building a vision for mankind for how do we solve all these problems. Well, I just want to make the point that artists can be used to a great deal just to show people, what it's like to eat vegan, what it's like to live without money, what it's like to do this. They can do everything from artistic renderings to animated videos. And then my third final point real quick is arcology. And I went to that meeting in San Francisco last month, and I watched the presentation by Michael, what's his last name?
Gosney,
yes. And he's got some great ideas there, but I don't think we have time to build a whole bunch of new dwellings. I think arcology can best be utilized by telling people how to change the way they live in their own houses. We're going to have to, in my opinion, we're going to have to start, utilizing our basements, our daylight basements, our full basements, and start, because it'll be cool in the summer, warm in the winter, and we need to consolidate and learn how to live in smaller spaces like that. And I think that arcology could help us do that a lot. So that's all I wanted to say. This is those 3 points. Thank you.
Just jump in and say that, one of the things to that point, Adam, is if we just started taking down fences, my neighborhood's all fenced. Everybody's got their little plot of land and it's pretty much next to useless. But if you took down fences, and if people, could come together as a community and say, we want to do organic vegetable farming now that the fences are down, without pesticides, without herbicides, you get your food security, plus you're pulling out carbon dioxide, and you're eating healthy plant-based diet right locally. There's so much potential if we just took down fences to begin with. There's some prime agricultural fruit growing land in British Columbia, for example, called the Okanagan Valley. And sad to say, when I was a boy, I went out there and most of the valley was just orchards and big vegetable farms and such. And now today it's all carved up into little plots, and all that good prime fruit growing land has been chopped up. But if people just took down their fences, they could replant orchards between all the properties, and just have a tremendous regeneration of that area. Sorry, go ahead, Dr.
Sorry, that's a great suggestion. I think that's what it comes down to: tearing down fences between us, and tearing down barriers between us and other species. And looking at all life as one. And on the story of money, interestingly, there is an equivalent of the apple tree story in the Bible. There is an equivalent in the Vedas, in the Hindu texts. And that actually explains to you what the knowledge tree story in the Bible was trying to tell us. And so there it is about money. It's about money, power, sex, and fame, the four main fruits of the tree. And it talks about all these people who were standing under the tree and wishing. It's a wishing tree. It gives you what you wish for. And as they wish, they get more miserable. The more they wish, the more miserable they get. And eventually, it talks about these old men congregating under the tree, having spent their whole lives wishing under the tree for sex, fame, money, and power. And they're miserable. And so they're in three different groups. And the first group says, we must have been wishing for all the wrong things. If you could go back and wish for different things, I'm sure we'd have been a lot happier. And the second group says, it has all been a hoax and a farce. Okay, our entire life has been a mess, and because we just suffered under the tree, and they were fools as well. And the third group was the most foolish of the lot. They come under the tree and they say, "We are so miserable, we wish we were dead." And the tree grants them that wish, and they're immediately reborn underneath the same tree, because the tree always grants wishes in dualities. Whatever you wish for comes with its exact opposite. If you wish for money, you get scarcity in other respects, right? If you wish for fame, you get isolation. If you wish for sex, you get jealousies. So everything comes with its opposite under the tree, and this is why the tree was making everyone miserable. So finally, it talks about this lame child who was watching all this from inside the window of the hut. And he, for the first time, began to see the brilliant cosmic swindle that was being performed under the tree. So with that, he realized that, that he didn't want to wish under the tree anymore. He also wanted to go out and wish for a good leg. Okay, but he said, "No, I don't want to wish under the tree. I'm just going to. I feel compassion for all the suffering under the tree." So with that, he lost the desire to wish, and he became detached from the tree. And with that combination of suffering, combination of compassion and detachment, he was the happiest among all of them, the wishing under the tree. Okay, so that's where the story ends. And then in the Upanishads, they say that the wishing child and the watching child are inside each one of us. That's our duality. And it's up to us to enable our watching child over our wishing child. Okay, so it makes it seem as if, and in fact, that's the purpose of all meditation techniques from the East, is to help us identify with our watching child and to observe our own wishing child and to become compassionate to our own wishing child. And then in the Bhagavad Gita, the same story comes up, because the Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between man and God. And there, man is asking God, "Why should I wish under the tree? Why do you make me wish under the tree? I can just step back here and observe things, and I let you do all the work. You're God, so do all the work yourself." And God says, "No. How do you think I do my work? Through you. So you have to go wish under the tree. And then he taught him how to wish. He said, you go under the tree and you wish for the benefit of everyone else. And you say, I don't want anything from this tree for myself. Okay? So you wish for the benefit of all and become detached from the outcome of your wishing. Then you'll be perfectly happy wishing under the tree, and everyone will be happy because of your wishing. So as a species, we are the only species that has access to the knowledge tree. So we should be wishing for the benefit of all other species and saying, we don't want anything from this knowledge tree for ourselves. Okay? So when we deploy our technologies and deploy our knowledge for the benefit of all life, then we'll be perfectly happy using the technology, and all the other species will be happy because we are using the technology. So that is the transition that we are going to. Okay? Again, it's really literally applying the knowledge tree for its right purpose. So it helped me understand what were they teaching us in the Bible. In the Bible also, there was they were banished from Eden because they ate the apple themselves. If they had used the apple for the benefit of others, maybe they would have stayed in Eden, right? So it's our return back to Eden. So we have to return back to Eden knowing that we should be using the knowledge tree for the benefit of other species and not for ourselves. Anyway, sorry. Thank you very much.
No, beautiful. Beautiful, Dr. Rao. Love it. Wow.
In the book Ishmael by Quinn, I don't know if you've read that, Dr. Rao. They talk about the gorilla who's talking to his human student, talks about the Garden of Eden and the tree. In fact, there were two trees, the tree of knowledge and the tree of wisdom. I know it sounds the same, but they weren't. No, the tree of life, excuse me, and the tree of knowledge. And he says that the tree of life we were meant to feed from, but the tree of knowledge was really only for the gods, but we were attracted to that. And so we keep eating from the tree of knowledge, thinking that we have the final say, when actually only the gods know the who shall live and who shall die, and whether this is good or not good, and that we don't have that and should not have that authority to know that and decide that. Only the gods can. And he suggests that we need to get back to feeding from the tree of life and relinquish our desire to feed from the tree of knowledge, and understand that that is only the job of the gods.
Hey, Melissa, I'd like to add to that. So in Genesis, in the Bible, it talks about man, Adam and Eve living in the Garden of Eden and eating from the tree of knowledge. And then God kicks him out of the Garden of Eden before he could start eating from the tree of life. And so anthropological studies show that mankind originated from Africa about 300,000 years ago. Now, I think that the Bible is written in an allegorical type of sense. I don't think that Adam and Eve were the sole individuals living on earth. I think that they're talking about mankind. And it doesn't say in there how long of a time that mankind lived in the Garden of Eden. So it could have been 300,000 years. It could have been an eon of time. So if mankind lives in the Garden of Eden for 300,000 years, and then we start popping up, civilizations start popping up here and there all over the world. You got the Incans, the Mayans, the Egyptians, the Atlantans, a whole bunch of them, and they all rise up and fall. So whether we're eating from the tree of knowledge, or we're wishing, or whatever, when we become civilized, we've left that natural way of living. When we lived for those 300,000 years, I see that we lived as hunter-gatherers in perfect harmony. or not, maybe not perfect, but in harmony with the earth. And after that, when we started eating from the tree of knowledge, then we, like the gods, like you said, Melissa, the gods, they wanted that for their tree, not for mankind's use. And so mankind is curious, and so we start eating from that tree anyway. And some of the fruits on that tree are poisonous, and I think they're poisonous to mankind. That's why we can't eat from them. And I think money is definitely the biggest poison, and it has affected all mankind. And so another thing that's interesting about the Bible is that it talks about mankind living in the Garden of Eden, but it doesn't express how long we lived in there. And then in the end of the third chapter of Genesis, it talks about God throwing mankind out of the Garden of Eden. And then from the rest of the whole Bible is all about mankind's living after we left the Garden of Eden. So we get a perspective that's distorted, because all that time that happened after we left the Garden of Eden is since mankind has become civilized. And Genesis 4:2 talks about Cain and Abel, and how I think it was Cain was Cain was the planter and Abel was the herder. And so mankind left the Garden of Eden. Well, all that time that since we left the Garden of Eden has only been since we've been civilized. It's only like 5,000 years for this civilization. But before that, we lived for 300,000 years as hunters and gatherers, walking with God in the Garden of Eden. I mean, the whole earth was prolific and beautiful, like the Garden of Eden. And wherever you could adapt and survive, that was where you lived and how you lived. And so now we're just we're destroying our land. I'm getting off subject here, but I'll just end there. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. Thanks.
I'll just add, Adam, in talking about the story of Adam and Eve, I always like to think about how there's a obfuscation done by Adam when God asks him, did you eat from the tree as well? And he doesn't actually answer God directly. He says, it was the woman you sent me. That's a type of obfuscation. That's a projection. It's a deception. And I think as men, we need to stand up and recognize that we have a tendency to be the deceivers, the deceptive ones. I think because we don't have a womb, we don't have, like, the heart is part of the body, and women by their nature with their womb, and in fact I like to call them womb men because that's where woman comes from, they're naturally gifted for compassion, whereas men are not. And I recently came across an interesting article in Psychology Today, so it's a reputable psychology magazine. There are 20 times more men psychopaths than female psychopaths. So psychopath, that is someone that's a soul killer. And in fact, Christianity, which I'm now of the opinion Jesus Christ never wanted anyone to make a religion out of him, only his commandments to love. That's all he left us with. Men have, if you ever have a ladder, if you ever have a pyramid structure, the psychopaths are going to be the ones that will do anything and everything lie and deceive their way to the top of any pyramid. And this is where the indigenous wisdom comes in again, because they're not perfect people. They're just human beings as well. But so many of their cultures have had roles where the clan mother has the authority to remove a male leader, a chief, for misconduct or malfeasance or deception or for being a psychopath. And I think that's where we need to really look at our governance, the corporate structures, these pyramids, they're becoming massive. The global military, pharma, media, food giant, industrial, congressional complex. There's just massive, huge pyramid structures, and if we don't have something to take the psychopath out of the leadership role, we're going to be deceived. And again, that's what I think the story of Adam and Eve has for us. That fundamentally.
Hey, Miles, you're cutting out.
Okay, sorry. I was just saying that fundamentally.
Miles, you're cutting out.
I'll just wrap up then. Thank you.
But I'd like to just say that there's a lot of reasons we've done a lot of things, and we're all psychopaths. I mean, it's not just the corporate leader that climbs. We're all psychopaths. I mean, you have to be kind of psychopathic just to go out and start your car, or to live in this modern technology type of artificial world that we live in. I mean, and if you're given the opportunity to make $100 million in 10 days, you're probably going to take it, and you'll justify it. You'll justify it somehow. You'll justify it. So we're all psychopaths. The question is, what makes mankind become psychopathic? What causes us to foul our own nest? What causes us to be out of sync with all the other species of life on Earth?
And that's where the governance needs to be. We need to have governance that will, if I'm a psychopath, something's got to take me out of the leadership role.
Well, that's where the collective intelligence comes in. I think I agree with Jamin. I mean, we build this website where the collective intelligence of mankind and start putting all this plan set together. Then we can start, envisioning a way out, and people will come and join it and start building. And then we use, artificial intelligence to help us assimilate it all and make it into put it into an order that we can all understand it, or we can get our arms around it. But I mean, it's like you said, removing fences. Well, that's a great idea, and that should be put in the overall plan. But you can't just go tearing down fences, or you're going to have, cows and critters getting run over by cars on the highways. So everything's connected, and we have to have an overall plan that tells us what to do. And what I'm saying is, if you eliminate money, which is going to be part of the plan, then all of a sudden you can change your whole system of governance so that you develop an all-volunteer workforce, and you standardize and you consolidate. And then the traffic on the highway becomes reduced by like 80%. Now you can start removing the fences. You can lower the speed limit. You don't have to build more roads. You can start turning more roads over and returning them to the environment. I mean, if we get rid of money, that's the main obstacle for everything. And then all these things that people are going to do to try and solve the problem, the first question is they're going to say is, well, how much will it cost? It's just there's no way we're going to solve all these problems if we're dealing with money. That's why they have martial law. You have to get rid of that's why a policeman can commandeer a car. He doesn't go rent a car. We have to get rid of the main obstacle first. That's my opinion. Thanks.
All right, beautiful discussion, everyone. We've been at it a little over 2 hours, so I think it's probably getting to a good point to wrap. We do this, just so everyone knows, every week on Tuesday, starting at 11 a.m. Pacific time every Tuesday. Everyone is welcome. It's open to the public. And so anyway, any final comments before we wrap for now? And then Dr. Rao, after we do wrap up, if you have a couple of minutes, I'd like to chat with you a little bit, just kind of one-on-one at the end, and see how we might plan to organize together so that we can build this platform together.
Well, I'll just say goodbye, and what a treat it was to meet Dr. Rao, given that I just watched one of his Zoom webinars last night and this morning, and here he is. So looking forward to working with you.
Miles, you're
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Miles.
I really enjoyed the conversation with all of you. Thank you for all of your beauty and your hearts, and for living your compassion out loud. And I'll look forward to speaking with you all another time and hearing what everyone's been up to. And just thank you for uplifting us all, Dr. Rao.
Sure.
Awa.
Awa.
See you next time.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Adam. Great to see you, buddy. Okay, so I'll stop broadcasting and recording right now. And thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next time.